Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist News and discussion of the good old US of A. I am Charles York. Today we have some sad news to bring to you. One of the pretenders or claimants to the Brazilian imperial throne, Louise of Orleans, has died today, the 15th of July. And unfortunately, we don't know much about him personally, so our discussion about him will really be focused primarily on the on Brazil and the failures of the Republic itself. But for now, there is one thing that as Catholics we can do, and that is, of course, pray for the repose of his soul. And so, oh, I lost my page. Oh, never mind. Okay, I have it. So I will pray a prayer that typically it used to be in the masses for the dead. All right. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Deliver me, O Lord, from death eternal in that awful day, when the heavens and earth shall be moved, when thou shalt come to judge the world by fire. Dread and trembling have laid hold on me, and I fear exceedingly because of the judgment and the wrath to come. When the heavens and earth shall be moved, when thou shalt come to judge the world by fire. On that day, that day of wrath, of sore distress, and of all wretchedness, that day great and exceedingly bitter, when thou shalt come to judge the world by fire. Eternal rest granted to him, O Lord, and let the perpetual light shine upon him. Deliver me, O Lord, from death eternal on that awful day, when the heavens and earth shall be moved, when thou shalt come to judge the world by fire. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. All right. So, hopefully he's in heaven now, or at the very least in purgatory. So I would ask that you continue to pray for the repose of his soul, and obviously the repose of the souls of, well, anyone who's died, really. So yeah, with that said, and the fact that admittedly we don't really know that much about him, as I said before, we'll really be primarily talking about Brazil and how the Republic has kind of, what's the correct term? Messed it up. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a more strongly worded.
Piloted the country off a cliff.
I mean, yeah, Rio de Janeiro. You got that cliff there. It could, yeah. That's a fitting metaphor. For those of you who don't know how the Brazilian Republic was established, the Empress of Brazil, whose name escapes me, abolished slavery, and a bunch of people were super unhappy about this little thing, and they overthrew the empire, and I was talking to Will before the podcast, and it's just both Brazil and Portugal had their monarchies overthrown in the most inconvenient ways, especially for a modern audience.
Did you say Empress?
I think it was the Empress, right?
No, it was Emperor Pedro II.
Oh, I'm probably getting something confused by someone else. Yeah. Okay, yeah, and I remember his last words, I think, were, "I wish was it peace and prosperity for Brazil." See, I can know what I'm talking about. You see, a Monarchist Minute, I don't edit out my mistakes, not because I'm lazy, but probably that, but because I want you to know that I am indeed a flawed human being, despite my charming voice and not at all inconsistent manner of speech. Anyways, what was my point? My train of thought derailed off a cliff. Oh yeah. Anyways, the Portuguese and the Brazilians both had their monarchy overthrown in such a way that is so inconvenient to moderns. Because, as I said, the Brazilian monarchy was overthrown because slavery was abolished, and the Portuguese monarchy was overthrown because the king didn't want to go to war with literally the British Empire in order to press Portugal's claims to the pink map idea. Where they wanted to have a transcontinental colony, or colonies, I guess, they would stretch from coast to coast. You see, the goal of the goal of a lot of the European powers in the scramble from Africa was to gain a transcontinental colony going one way or the other, and the British succeeded, but they had to beat up the Germans first. So yay them, I guess. But that's beside the point. I'll let someone else talk now.
The thing about Brazil and the Brazilian monarchy, and particularly the Pedro II, Pedro II loved his country so much that he chose to leave on peaceful terms so he wouldn't see it destroyed by civil war, much like Emmanuel III of Italy. But Pedro II served as a moderator, in which case his powers involved moderating and controlling the different factions in the Brazilian legislature and such. And Pedro was definitely an enlightened monarch. He was a example to monarchs across the world at a time of what they should be and what they should do. And Pedro's last act as monarch was to end the institution of slavery, something that was very, very controversial in Brazil due to Brazil having such a slave-dependent economy so heavily dependent on mass agriculture and plantation agriculture, particularly to grow coffee. But he did it because he was right, and that lost him the upper classes in the aristocracy, and so that was the final leg that toppled the monarchy and allowed the Republicans to basically give him the boot and leave him in exile in France.
I mean, it wasn't really as much the aristocracy as more the landed gentry. By the landed gentry, I mean the really large plantation owners that relied on those slaves to actually make economy. Which, I mean, if you really want to go down the libertarian pipeline, you'd say that Emperor Pedro II was wrong for trying to take away the profits of those men, which I also do not believe. Because frankly, like just in the American South, like the huge plantation owners got on quite finely after the abolition of slavery because they didn't have to pay for the medical care, the housing, and the food of their now paid labor. Which actually had worse lives because they were being paid and not because they were having everything provided for them by their owners.
Yeah, pro tip: if you're going to abolish slavery and cause a massive economic upheaval, maybe think of a plan first before you just go. I mean, obviously, it was a good thing it was abolished, but you could have gone about it a little better. Although, in fairness, the U.S. government could have gone around the 1860s a little better. But
if President Johnson wasn't such a massive simp for ex-Confederates, I would have confiscated all of the Confederate land, all the plantation owners' land that sided with the Confederacy, and then divided it up amongst the free slaves.
Hey, you could have been called an anti-Semite if you would have done that, because guess what? A decent chunk of the large plantation owners in America were.
I don't care.
About 40%, just putting out that number.
Yeah, I mean I mean, outright compensation of the soil itself, that seems a little far. I mean, maybe a special tax in order for them to buy land and somewhere in order to give to the freed slaves to buy land somewhere else specifically for that purpose. But as somebody who thinks that generations should be, who sort of likes the idea of generations being tied to a specific piece of soil, yeah, that seems to go a little far for me. But I don't know. This isn't the time to bring up the Civil War.
Right. My opinion is there's a price for treason, and land confiscation's a pretty low price compared to other things.
Okay, but was the Civil War treason, though? The United States before the Civil War was seen as a union of states, and states were perfectly within their right to leave. And most of the states that left did all the legal processes to properly leave. So,
In fact, New York, it was either, I think it was New York, but it might have been another northern state, maybe one of the outright, New England ones. But they only signed on to the Constitution because with the express promise that if this whole thing went south, but they could leave at any time. And in, I think, the late 1810s or the 1820s, New England was actually discussing separating from the Union to form its own country because the economy wasn't doing so hot after the War of 1812, because shockingly, wars aren't that good for the economy. But anyways, yeah, so, and the whole idea of whether or not it's inherently treasonous to secede from a country that was founded on secession. I think it was a comedian or somebody who Abraham Lincoln asked on his way to Washington what he thought about the whole. Lincoln asked this comedian what he thought of the whole situation, and the comedian said, "Well, if secession be valid, my thoughts have to lie with the Confederacy. If secession not be valid, then God save the king." I mean,
I mean, I just see the Civil War as the ultimate expression of American power politics. Because it was very de facto, you're not allowed to leave the Union, but de jure, you were allowed to. And unfortunately, at the time, people believed more in de jure than de facto power. In fact, a lot of people today are still mistaken by this idea that people say have de jure by we have rights and we have liberties and yada yada, but de facto you say a certain thing, you're getting a knock on your door by the FBI. You do something, you're getting a knock on your door by the police. These de jure rights don't apply when there's actual force behind um uh when there's force behind the power that will enforce its own reign. So that's what Lincoln essentially did, is he used the force that he could to um uh, force the southern states back into the Union by the end of a rifle.
and I mean, and here's the whole thing with the Civil War from my perspective. I would have, if I lived at the time, and obviously on the conditions that I still think along the same lines that I do in the present, um, I would not want to have seen the Union split. But and I would have tried to keep the South to stay. But if partly if not just exclusively for the reason of I want the Grand Union and whatnot, I don't want us to split into even more countries, but also for the reason that if the southern landed landowners were the closest thing we had to at least to a somewhat aristocratic class, even if they weren't exactly the best at it, and a more stabilizing influence against the Puritan influenced Yankees, but at the same time, I don't think that I would have felt comfortable trying to force the South to stay in uh, at the end of a barrel, because we are the product of secession. The United States as a concept. There was no such thing as an American. It's not like America was a country that existed and then we were conquered by the British and then we fought a war for our independence. No, we were we were British. So if you want to keep with the American ethos, then if you want to talk about who were the true successors to the revolution, because if you listen to a lot of the songs or listen to a lot of the rationale, you'll see both sides claiming, as I guess is common in civil wars, that they are the true successors to insert thing they appeal to here, which is why the Confederates had, I think it was maybe it was their Department of War or something that had an image of Washington on it, and of course, there was a very catchy song, even if it isn't exactly my favorite piece of folk music. 'Twas in the days of '76 when Freeman, young and old, bum all fought for independence. Then each hero brave and bold, 'Twas then the noble stars and stripes and triumph did appear, and defended by brave patriots, the Yankee volunteer. Yeah, but I mean, both sides were making an appeal to that war. In fact, there was essentially a gentleman's regiment, or whatever you want to call it, of it was folded in as an actual military unit. I can't remember its name or whatever, but it was before the war. It was essentially just a bunch of people parading in Revolutionary era garb, and they. But then once the war started, they were folded in as an actual regiment. So for a brief while before they swapped their uniforms for modern types, you would see these very 1770s and 80s looking soldiers in an 1860s battlefield. Which, I mean, just imagine you're in I don't know, World War III in Europe, and suddenly you see a bunch of people running at you with I guess modern AK-12s or whatever, but they're in World War II Soviet garb. I mean that's just funny.
I mean, I would make the argument that World War II Soviet can very much still be used by a second-rate power.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm not saying that the American
but
Revolutionary
but
outfits were
I
necessarily
get you.
inferior. Yeah.
But I get your point. As a military man, though, like I can actually like see practicality in ancient war gear.
World War
'Cause-
II kit is being used in Ukraine right now. They're still using like Soviet surplus for that time, Soviet machine guns, and I think we've all
yes,
seen a picture of that. I think it was a Donetsk militiaman that had the Mossad against strapped to his back.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, if it works, it
So-
works. The thing with the Mosin is it uses. I don't know if 7.62 by was it 34R or I can't remember 39R. Anyways, I don't know if that's the oldest cartridge still in common military service, but it's probably I mean, I think it's the oldest one in common military service, but it's the same cartridge used by, I think it's the Dishka or PK, or maybe it's the PKM. Um, but yeah, no, hey, if you still have to make, or at least you have a massive stockpile to get through, uh, you might as well keep using it. I'm not saying the Russians should just or the Russians or the Ukrainians should just equip every soldier with a rifle. The man with the rifle shoots. The man without
th-
the rifle follows. But
there's
still,
there's a reason why U.S. Special Forces and Special Operations use the M14 for so long, even despite it leaving standard issue after 1968, I want to say. When it was replaced by the M16, because it was a good moderate-sized round marksman rifle. Something that was portable and usable, reliable, over other rifles that they could have taken. So despite the age of a weapon, a round made in 1940 will have the same effect as a round made in 1922. It doesn't matter. I get they're of the same caliber, of course,
And
and
3
quality of metal.
308 really seems to be the immortal round when it comes to militaries. The AK-47 is chambered in it.
well,
Well, it's a
chambered in a
Mhm.
different round that's very similar.
it
Right.
just
Oh,
okay. It's like the
Well,
distinction between 223 and 556.
5.56.
Yes, they're very close to being the same. In fact, many AR platforms can shoot both. But if you load a magazine, you don't load it with a combination of the two. You either load it with 5.56 or 223 because the shape of the round is different.
Yeah, and also, I think unless what's the rule? If it's made for 5.56, it can shoot both, but 223 will be less accurate, or is it the other way around? I don't know. Anyways,
I would have to actually physically test between the two rounds to know
yeah,
the difference.
I don't know. But the point is, I mean, if something works, it works. But yeah, I mean, and I was gonna say, well, actually, I'll let Will finish his point before I say the thing that I was thinking of. Will Darth was talking about the M14.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, we've been seeing a lot of people, especially in the current state of the Ukrainian war, using antique kit, and it's a little comical, honestly. Of course, the Russians had to dig into their reserve of tanks that were 60, 70 years old, or like very, very outdated.
Well, we don't. I don't think we
Okay,
have confirmation that the Russians
no,
are sending T-55s. We just think they are.
Well,
no, there are
six,
T-64s not being used by the Russian army, but being used by the Donetsk and Luhansk republics because they are not technically part of the um uh, Russian forces. They are allied forces. Um, and it's essentially a lend-lease program between Russia and those two small breakaway republics of the Ukraine. I refuse to use the term Ukraine alone because, by the way, Ukraine just means border region for the audience. It was organized as a border region of the Russian Empire, not as an independent nation. That was a Soviet creation after the Russian Civil War.
one can argue that it was even before Soviet control because many Ukrainian nationalists seceded from Russia because they didn't want to be part of the Soviet Union.
Yes, but that was mostly in the region. That would be in like the north central and northwestern regions, which was generally seen as like a Ukraine. That was like seen as the Ukraine. But then there was the region of Novorossiya that was incorporated into the Ukraine after the Soviet takeover of Russia. They also Carpathia was also incorporated into the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Um, uh, when those regions were historically different provinces and in fact had completely different populations than the Ukraine, which is like a third of what people see as modern Ukraine.
And part of that goes vacant between what parts of the region were under the control of the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth and which region were under the control by the Duchy of Muscovy.
Oh yeah. Actually, you know, they're like the wester you go, the more Polish influence there is in the architecture and whatnot, and in the more east you go, the more I guess Russian it is. So I think the real solution here to the Ukrainian problem would be to just
Russian Tsardom.
well, yes, but give Poland western the parts that used to be part of the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, give the Russians what they want, and then that way the rest will will have to be neutral because they'll hate both the West and the East,
Well,
and
also
Ukrainian neutrality is preserved.
you're forgetting about the Hungarians. They also have a slice of that pie, and they're in the Carpathian Hungarians in Ukraine.
Well, until the Hungarians give Slovakia, South Slovakia back, I'm not going to consider them.
No.
Moldova to Romania while we're at it.
Oh yes, that Moldova being a separate country just
It's like Kaliningrad. It exists specifically because of shenanigans after World War II.
well, yeah. I mean, the whole point was the Soviets didn't want it to become part of Romania, so they changed the language, and then the Moldovans changed it back, and then and then they announced their intention that yes, we are the same people and stuff, but then Romania and them haven't united, and apparently it's some baggage with Transnistria because there's a Russian minority and a Ukrainian, or maybe I don't know. There's a bunch of minorities that make the Romanians uncomfortable.
So I mean, there is a claim to an independent Moldova because of the Principality of Moldova before the unification of Romania between the Wallachians and the Moldovians under the same crown. I forget how that process actually happened, though. I'm not too learned on how Romania formed.
Well, what was I gonna say? The real victims in this entire mess, and like the Soviet messing with the ethno-linguistic lines of their states and their republics, is how they displaced all of the Crimean Tatars and deported them to Central Asia.
I mean, the Tatars were a force of subversion even within the Russian Empire way before the Soviets. I mean, if you're just looking on it in pure Machiavellian terms, it was a stroke of brilliance to replace the Tartars with ethnic Russians and to deport the Tartars to more Islamic regions of the Soviet Union, where they would be with other Turkic tribes. So
Yeah, it was.
We look at it in a Machiavellian sense, but that doesn't necessarily make it right.
I mean, also if it wasn't the Soviet Union doing that, and if it was more the Russian Tsardom doing that, I'd say it'd actually be pretty based.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the whole. I mean, this sort of kind of gets close to the Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand expelling the Muslims and the Jews, and the way and on the surface level that seems really terrible. But part of the reason they did that was because there was always this constant fear that that another caliphate or whatever would come in and try to sweep into Iberia again, which wasn't, let's face it, that wasn't particularly fun the first time. And then also, if you have a whole bunch of Muslims around while doing that, they're probably not going to side with you in that invasion.
They would be a fit. They would be a fifth column. The thing
Yeah.
about like especially, I mean, Christians can be a fifth columnist in nations too. I'm not saying that it's exclusive to Muslims, but Islam has a proclaimed eternal holy war against the infidel, and they are to always side with fellow Muslims in any conflict over the infidels. That's why you see a lot of support, especially in Western countries, with Muslims inside of Western countries supporting other Muslims even when they commit grievous acts against the more native stock population. Like this is happening a lot in England, with the grooming gangs, where because mostly it was Muslims perpetrating, like literally 99% of the grooming gangs are Islamic, in England. Then they have Muslim counselors and the local councils cover up for them. And they force the police to turn a blind eye, etc. It's been happening for decades now. That's just so they are pretty much just a fifth columnist population, especially if you're not an Islamic country. Because ultimately Islam is a proselytizing religion, even more than Christianity.
Which, which is sort of sad when you consider that Catholicism, of course, has the truth, and you think we would be all ready to spread that across the world, because if you're not willing to
Well,
spread your religion because my feelings, then that kind of makes you seem
I
like
mean
you hate the other person because
that
you're
is a
not.
modern disingenuous effect of modernity upon especially the one true Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, where we used to go out and mostly under the banner of the great European empires spread the church to all corners of the globe. And then with the introduction, the poison of liberal ideas and the subversive elements of those thought processes, we have been effectively neutered of our proselytizing nature and lost that divine purpose to what we used to possess.
if I may weigh in on this, as a evangelical Protestant, I've noticed the big thing when it comes to proselytizing people and like getting people to convert is that the Catholic Church is very, very passive these days about getting people to convert. Like, if you want to convert to Catholicism, it's easy. You just have to go to a Catholic church, talk to the priest. You just have to.
No.
You got to go through RCIA, which, depending on the person running the RCIA program, is either a good idea or a bad idea.
Go to a FSSP. That will be extremely hard.
Yeah.
To
I
get
mean,
Catholicism.
Oh no, I mean the thing with
I wasn't done yet.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but anyway, like it's very, very passive. Meanwhile, amongst Protestants, we got street preachers, we got people who pass out Bibles, we got people who go door to door to talk. We take a more active effort in converting and like getting people to come. And yeah, we can argue about theology. I don't want to argue about theology right now, but I just want to say that the Catholic Church really should take some pointers from our playbook when it comes to winning converts and be more active in it.
Well, the thing is that we used to really be active, but the problem with specifically Catholics in America is that the whole ever since our inception as a nation, we've never seemed to take an active view, and maybe that's Masonic influence in this idea of if you're just a good person, then this whole Jeffersonian idea, as long as you don't pick my pocket, then we can be friends. But maybe it's that influence, or maybe it's the fact that we were afraid that the Protestants would beat us up like those Know Nothing riots. In fact, there was actually some Baptist or whoever minister who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan who shot this Catholic priest because his daughter married a Catholic and she became Catholic, or maybe it was his son married a Catholic. Anyways, so yeah. But the thing is that the Catholic Church nowadays, we don't. A lot of people inside the hierarchy don't really see the need to evangelize because they don't view the church as necessary for salvation, which it is, because we know that outside the church there is no salvation. And we could talk about exactly what that means another time, but probably not in this podcast because, I'm not a theologian and I don't necessarily have a right to preach about these things. But outside the church there's no salvation is not something that a lot of people really believe anymore. And you'll notice that a lot of convert, like Anglican priests who become Catholics and form part of the Anglican ordinariate. Very confusing term, I know, because the very high church Anglicans are called Anglo-Catholics, and then the Anglicans who become Catholic are called Anglican ordinariate. A long story. Anyways, I mean those people. Those priests. They have a really, generally speaking, have a great fire for evangelization because, of course, they went through all that effort of becoming Catholic in the first place because they acknowledge that, that you kind of need to be under the Pope's authority. And I mean, the fact remains is that until people really see the church as necessary for salvation, which it is, then there's going to be no incentive to evangelize because, let's face it, evangelization is awkward, and there are people in my community who are doing that, and I really should try to join those efforts in my local, not a parish, but now it's a what do they call it, an oratory now, but the fact remains is until people see the church as necessary for salvation, they're not going to evangelize because one, evangelization is awkward, and two, every time Catholics have evangelized, it's always resulted in a period of persecution. Very rarely, I can't name an example off the top of my head where Catholics started to evangelize in any place, and then we just peacefully became the majority and started running the show. There was always a series of martyrdoms first. I mean, in Japan, that series of martyrdoms was so violent that Catholics in Japan were just a small minority trying to survive until the 1800s or whenever Catholic priests weren't immediately shot on sight again. I mean, everywhere we go, and so if you don't view the church as necessary for salvation, then then evangelizing is a pointless effort because everyone will just end up in heaven anyways, according to your worldview. And so why go out and go through all that awkward talking to people thing, and why risk getting beat up or shot by someone? I mean that's the mentality here. I mean that may not be, and I'm not saying that everyone who's reluctant to evangelize is a coward, you know. But I am because let's be honest, it's easy for me to talk to people on the internet about these things for whatever reason. But somebody's over Discord. But if I'm talking to somebody in real life, maybe it's just my autistic brain or whatever. It 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 messes with me. Like today, I had to ask my boss because a couple weeks before, because I'm employed now, but before I was employed, I was working for a while before I was legally employed, and I just had to ask my boss or my supervisor a simple question. How are you going to handle the hours? And I had like 3 opportunities to talk to her, and by the time I did, and it turned out great, obviously, because I not been obliterated for asking a simple question. But I don't know. That's just me. But the whole point. But sorry for waffling on. But the point is, people don't view the church as necessary for salvation. The ones that do, and there are ones that do, right? Because you have Matt Fradd and Brian Holdsworth and all these other great Catholic YouTubers out there, and you have people like Catholic Answers Live, and such. So there are those people, and there's people in my community who are like that. But until the hierarchy as a whole views the church as necessary for salvation, and then puts 2 and 2 together, that oh shoot, if we don't try to spread the gospel, that could potentially mean the loss of, depending on the level, hundreds or thousands or millions of souls.
Also spread the gospel under the true authority of the church. That's the key difference too. Like Protestants think that they can spread the gospel but have any loose interpretation that they want, while then in Catholic Church, frankly, it's hard to approach because you have to accept in your mind that you cannot interpret this on your own, because frankly, if you're not trained properly, you are not part of that proper caste to know these things. Like the Bible was written for Brahmins, not for laymen. That's especially in the Old Testament. That's how it was explicitly written, and in the New Testament too. Like all the apostles wrote as they were Brahmins. By the way, Brahmin is the term for priestly caste in the Indian society. The ones who would study the Vedas every day their entire life, and it would be their caste responsibility to dispense the gods upon the laity who are not meant for that purpose in life.
Oh, not to derail this conversation, just to quickly say, I agree with you, Darth. I think that's one of the big problems with the Protestant church. We're too prone to fracturing, especially amongst the evangelicals and everyone going in which direction. But anyway, I wanted to say that Joe posted in the conference text chat, the Brazilian government actually declared 3 days of mourning in honor of their dead heir apparent.
Yeah, I think that's because there is a large integralist movement in Brazil. I know that just by entropy. The Brazilian government has always had a very strong Catholic integralist and imperialist movement within its borders. The Republic has been very, let's just say, tenuous, and oftentimes there have been interests within Brazil to maintain the republic. It's kind of like how France has to maintain the republic actively. The French state has to. The Brazilian state is in that same awkward situation where, because they have this very rich history of the empire and this very rich history of the Portuguese Empire before that, with the very strong Catholic integralism incorporated into the pathos of their society, the Republicans have had to fight these elements. But with Bolsonaro in there, I mean, I'm not saying that he's a Catholic integralist. He's definitely not. But he does see the value of trying to incorporate them into his coalition of general supporters, the imperialists and integralists in Brazil. So I could probably see that as like as his power play to mandate a 3 days of mourning.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that we managed to bring this topic full circle. Yeah, I apologize for kind of tripping myself up and repeating myself earlier. I hope you didn't. Well,
You're fine.
yeah. I'm sorry. I get like that. Whenever I used to, I don't know if anyone else did this, but used to rehearse for videos, I guess, or whatever, or concepts of YouTube videos that I had in my head that I never actually made. Where I would just, when I found a line I really liked, I would repeat it 3 times or however many times in rapid succession. I was a weird child.
Yeah. We were all weird children. I don't think anyone here wasn't a weird child.
Well, I mean, ever since, I don't know, it's kind of. I mean, especially in this day and age, somewhere down the line, there's going to be something that messes you up. whether it's just you're naturally autistic, or like I guess I am, or you're or the culture just blech you in some way. It's hard to be a truly normal person anymore unless your parents live, unless there's some secret neo-agrarian Catholic state somewhere in Utah somewhere that nobody knows about, where they don't have the internet and they're just living normal lives.
They're having to hide from the prosecution of the Mormons.
They're in oh, that's it. There was a Indian tribe of Pueblos that was around since Spanish times that converted, and they've secretly been contacting the Sane and inviting them to come over. That's it. There's still hope.
The Mormons are so weird to me.
They technically aren't even Christian.
Well, they didn't consider themselves Christian until about the 1950s, when they wanted to get in on the especially they wanted to get in the good graces of like the Protestant Christians. They wanted to be seen like in a coalition with them. So that's why they adopted the title Christian alongside Mormon, when initially they were just Latter-day Saints.
Yeah,
Which is a retarded term. But
I still don't understand why they aren't considered.
Well, okay. Oh, sorry. So according, and this is just what I learned in my religion class, so take this necessarily with a grain of salt. But in order to be considered a Christian, you have to, the bare minimum is for you to believe in the Apostles' Creed, which of the creeds of the church is, at least the ones in common use, is the shortest one. And the first one of that is, and that is, I believe in God, the one God. But Mormons believe that if you lived a good life, then you'll become a god of your own universe when you die, which is just ridiculous. So
Yeah,
that would inherently goes against the monotheism thing. And then another thing is, apparently Mormons, or maybe I'm confusing this with somebody else, but I think it's the Mormons. They also
think that this is just a general heresy. It's not necessarily something written in the Apostles' Creed, but they they also think that when you die, you won't see the face of Christ, which what? I mean,
Oh, they've effectively reduced Christ to the man, and the man was made a god to them. So and he was made the god of the of this universe. That is the basics of their theology. I mean, of course, it gets into crazier spirals, like the fact that they believe that Christ came to America, and the tribes of Israel are the Native American tribes, which is completely bonk. But
Yeah, it's basically bad Christian fan fiction. That's what the Book of Mormon is.
you know,
I mean, yes, but I'd also consider most modern Protestant Bibles as a bad fan fiction because they took out all the poetry from it. Well, a lot of them do.
well, I mean, here's something with Protestant Bibles in particular.
Good spirituals, though, in our defense.
No, I mean, here's something with the Protestant Bible. Okay, in the when you have the angelic salutation in, I think it's St. Luke's Gospel, the angel says, "Hail, full of grace." Okay, and not only and that's what's in the Greek, well, obviously except in Greek, and also the way that it's apparently I'm not a Greek scholar, so I wouldn't necessarily know, but the way that it's so I may be getting this wrong, but the way that the word is the tense implies that Mary's sanctification has already happened, right? So it's but the point is it's hail full of grace. But then the Protestant translation completely ignores that and says hail O most highly favored daughter. Okay, and that okay, that's not like translating something as a different word in order to because what a phrase meant back then means something different now, or translating a phrase from its literal into what it means to us or anything like that. That is straight up removing and changing the scripture because they couldn't accept that our blessed that our that Mary was free from original sin. They couldn't accept that, and it's this whole, and that just makes, and also it's the fact that Martin Luther removed 7 books from the Old Testament, and then he removed the Epistle of St. James. It's, I mean, I can't really consider a Protestant Bible completely and like legit. I mean, if I'm on a desert island, it's better than nothing. But I mean, that's just, I mean, it's, I mean, it's that's why. I know why Luther removed those books. It's because he disliked the fact that Second Maccabees mentioned praying for the dead, and the Epistle of St. James mentioned faith and works, and he couldn't get over that. Apparently, he reinvigorated some Hussite heresy that every action, no matter what, is at least a venial sin, according to them, because obviously everything you do has to be sinful in some way. Heresies are dumb.
Third.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not saying modern Lutherans. I don't think modern Lutherans actually are that in line with the theology of Martin Luther, because at least Martin Luther held a respect. I mean, this is just secondhand, but apparently, at least he held a respect to the Blessed Virgin. I don't think any of his articles or whatever actually targeted her. I could be wrong. I haven't read through all of them, but apparently, Luther and what he done, and then the King James Bible I mean, the King James Bible. There's a lot of people who like the King James Bible because it's old timey and it rhymes and it sounds nice. But one Dewey Reams Bible, if you want that,
English. That's the big thing. It's actually in English and not a dead language.
well, no, there was
No.
a Catholic translation of the Bible in English, of course, the English of the time, before the Protestant Reformation, and in fact, I think it was the King James Bible or something. Maybe Henry VIII tried to get, or somewhere in between that and that and King James. They tried to make another Bible to supplant that English Catholic translation of the Bible. There was a Catholic English Bible before 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 Henry, either before the Protestant Reformation or at least before Henry VIII did the thing. I mean, this whole but you had to understand that that the church. How do I put this? If the Bible was in any common language, that doesn't necessarily mean suddenly a lot of extra people could start reading it, because if you were literate at all, I mean, this is just me guessing, but if you were literate at all, chances are you probably already knew Latin and Greek, or at least Latin.
It was a requirement in pretty much every single university that you must study Greek and Latin. That was pretty much universal. And some also included other languages, like ancient Hebraic was included in a few universities. Not many, though. It would become popular amongst the Puritans, though, and they would make it as a part of their academic requirements in much of the New World. So trying to say Latin is also a dead language is also a myth, because it was the language of the intelligentsia, the language of the priestly caste, the language of kings, royalty, aristocracy, merchants. The people that were literate did know Latin. The people that were illiterate did not know Latin.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not saying that, if you're not a priest or whatever, you can't read the Bible, but it has to be done with a sense that there are certain things that you are going to read that you're not going to understand. And this is why there are study Bibles out there, and also this is why you should really take if you're going to, I'm not saying the Catholics shouldn't read the Bible, because obviously we should, but this is why something like Father Mike Schmidt's Bible in a year is good, because he can explain things that are there, although apparently he's not necessarily convinced that the Gospels go in order of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which, come on, they go in order of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and same, Mark, Luke, and John. But anyways, the fact remains is that there are people, the church fathers, and they knew a lot more. They knew a lot more about what the Bible meant than we do today.
Than a random guy from the 16th century spurging out over a few issues that he has.
Yes.
I mean, also, by the way, the early church fathers were students of the direct students of the apostles as well. So to try to claim that they didn't know what they were talking about, and it was some monk in the 16th century that knew, that is, quite frankly, illogical.
Yeah.
On all grounds.
Yeah, and I mean, I really need to get find a commentary of the church fathers on parts of scripture, because I watched this. It's listed as a Professor Biersack and Cologne talk on YouTube on the Tumble House channel, or Biersack and Cologne talk, but it was, I think it was just Professor Biersack, about the Good Samaritan, and he was going through what the church fathers taught about it. When you hear the parable of the Good Samaritan, which came up last week or the week before. I think it was last week at the time of our recording. In the readings, people often just talk about the surface level element that you'd get if you just read it. But then they were talking about, but Professor Biersack was talking about what the Church Fathers and how they read into it. I'll see if I can link the commentary. Maybe you can find it. But you listen to it and you're like, wow, because the Church Fathers they were more in tune with these things, obviously being closer to the apostles. And this is another thing too. What the church preaches as dogmatic, whether she defined it, in the 1950s, or whether it was the Council of Nicaea, whatever she defined, she already believed, and she believed it since the death of the last apostle. And it's a little hard to, for some people to wrap their heads around, but dogmas like the Immaculate Conception were believed and professed by the church at the time of the death of Saint John.
Also, a lot of Protestants also harp on, oh, well, you Catholics, you have a bunch of stuffy traditions. It's like, well, where do we get these traditions from? When Christ said that I am not here to change the law, I'm here to fulfill it. I'm probably, of course, paraphrasing. I'd have to get that exact verse in, but he came to fulfill the law. And you can see in the Catholic Church the ancient traditions incorporated into Christ's church. That's why we have an ecclesiastical structure instead of a Protestant, just feelings and anybody can be a pastor guy. It's like, no. In ancient Israel, there was a distinct priestly caste, which I think came from the tribe of Benjamin. Levi, okay.
And then specifically the it wasn't just any Levite who could be a priest. All the Levites were a part of. They had duties in the temple, but the actual priest came from the sons of Aaron, who were in the tribe of Levi specifically. But we are kind of getting close to lay evangelization, which we don't have a license to do. Well, you've got a license for that lay evangelization, mate.
Well, it's fine to discuss these matters, though.
Okay.
Like simple things, like say why we have the traditions that we do, and we carry them on for. I mean, you could say 2,000 years since Christ founded the one true Catholic Church, but you can extend that to also, well, we're also successors of the old law, which then that would include up to the time of Abraham. So we have these traditions from the old law that carry forth onto it, and that's why also the Catholic Church is referred to as Israel, because it became the third temple as revealed in Revelations. And the third temple is not a literal sense, like there's not going to be literally a third temple built in literally Canaan, because Revelations was ultimately a three-part book where it discussed the fall of the Roman Empire, rise of the one true Church of Christ, and then the apocalypse, which was, I think the apocalypse was like the last few chapters of it. So the first two parts of it were fulfilled, and it's the final part, the apocalypse, that is still in waiting for his return.
Which
anytime, any place.
Yep. You had to be. This is just a general thing. You should always be. Firstly, you should always stay free of mortal sin, because if you die in a state of mortal sin, and you're not repentant, you will rot in hell for all eternity. But and obviously you shouldn't sin because it's displeasing to God. But also you had to acknowledge that the end of the world could be at any time. We don't know the day or the hour. But yeah, no. But we shouldn't just be staying free of sin because the the end of the world could be tomorrow, but you should just be because you don't want to offend God.
I
Um,
mean,
The
there
minute,
is
30 centuries. You never know.
yes. I mean, I make this point to specifically the Protestants that keep on claiming that the apocalypse is literally tomorrow. The ones that truly believe that it is like right around the corner and that they set dates. I
oh yeah, one
say,
of the times when it didn't happen was known as the Great Disappointment.
mhm. I mean,
Believe
the
me, other Protestant, there's nobody who hates Protestants more than other Protestants oftentimes.
yeah, but as soon as a Catholic steps into a room, suddenly you'll see the Protestants come back together and be against the Catholic. Just saying. That's
Yeah.
how it.
Except the Anglo-Catholic sometimes do suffer an identity crisis, but
Well, yes,
we'll let them into their own corner.
that's because they are very schizophrenic about their identity. What was I going to say? Oh,
The people who
right.
claim doomsdays.
Well, yes. So I make this point that we are in a long haul game too. Like people forget about this. That the time between Abraham and Christ was 4 millennia. We are 2 millennia away from Christ. And I mean, yes, of course, Christ can come down at any time, but also, if there was that much time between Abraham and Christ, who is to say that there will not be the same amount of time or more for us before Christ's return? So I just say that to the also the doom mongers that say that well, there's nothing we can do. Christ is coming tomorrow or he's coming soon. No, you must be active as well. You must be active in preserving and being stewards of this world of sin, to build it up for Christ's kingdom. You cannot just be content and wait for him.
Yeah. The fact remains is that Christ gave the apostles the Great Commission. Yeah, I don't know how general it applies, whether it's just to the priest or not. But go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. He didn't set a time limit on that. He didn't say, do that for the next 2,000 years or whatever. No, he's.
I mean, I would say I kind of have to quote Fulton Sheen because he noticed this back in the 1950s that the the Western world has lost its zeal. It has truth, but it has no zeal. Well, then in the East, and he was referring to communism, they have zeal, but they have no truth. Um, and that was ultimately our undoing. The fact that we didn't possess that ancient zeal that we used to have, the zeal that the ancient Spaniards had to go convert all the nations of Central and South America to spread. With the spreading of the Spanish Empire also came the Catholic Church with it and brought all those people into it, which ultimately I would say was a good. And the shedding off of the evils of the Aztecs and the ancient Mayas, barbaric traditions that led to the sacrifices of millions of people in all. Um, so I just say we have lost this zeal, which I would say ultimately comes because we are in the age of decay. And in the age of decay, the religiosity in general and like the true like understanding of it. I'm not talking about like the I believe in Jesus Christ gang, the Jesus people gang that just say, oh yeah, I believe in him, but you can really call into doubt their actual understanding and their actual, let's just say, commitment as well to Christ and his kingdom. Um, this ultimately is a symptom of the age of decline and the Kali Yuga that we are in, which that's a whole getting into what the Kali Yuga is. It's essentially the Indian age of decline, which has been going on for 8,000 years according to the Hindus. So
Dang, when will they hit rock bottom? I'm sorry for lightening the tone, but
literally Indian ages go in like several millennia. Like they are long. Like before the Kali Yuga is ruled by the Kali Pushta. The Kali Pushna is the essentially Satan of Hinduism, the god of sin and rebellion, which he took control of the world about 8,000 years ago in the Kali Yuga, which roughly lines up too with the expelling of Adam and Eve and that period. There's a lot of crossover between the Hindu Vedas and the Old Testament, especially Genesis.
oh, that is actually an interesting point. When you look at, because obviously what happened, so you had Adam and Eve, our first parents, and then from them came, all of us, which is, the expression don't, but so obviously they had the original revelation, and the fullness of that original revelation was kept with the Jews, through, to Abraham, and then to the tribes of Israel, and then eventually, the we're now in the new covenant, but parts of that original revelation were obviously split off over time, and you can actually see uh 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 you can actually see, like especially in the older forms of these religions, like the almost trinitarian nature of the god in Hinduism, um and the fact that I think even in like the Greco-Roman cults or whatever, there were there were the three big, were there, yeah, there was, I don't know, but you could see pieces of this original revelation, and the fact, and even like perversions of biblical stories, like, people are like, well, every religion has a flood story, so therefore it must be false. No, it just means one religion is true and the others are just spin-offs.
So, I mean, I would say I am kind of a perennialist. And I've been delving into especially the Indian subcontinent, and they have the exact, like, pretty much verbatim the exact same myths in Genesis. They have the expelling of Adam and Eve from paradise. Of course, they go by different names, but I would have to pull up the names. But they do seem like the Jews derived the names from those two words because, I mean, Genesis was written after the Veda, where that was written for the expelling of out of the garden in India. They also have a very similar myth of the flood that pretty much lines up verbatim. In fact, they also do have a Moses character with the three sons that go out to repopulate the world in the Ararat mountains. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the Ararat mountains, if you derive it from the original, I believe it was a Mesopotamian language that was taken from. It actually means the highest mountains. So there's a lot of kudos that possibly Moses landed in the Himalayas, which also the Hindus and several other peoples do also claim that they landed in the Himalayas. And those were the mountains on which that were called Ararat when the seas withdrew.
Yeah, the thing is the what I was told in school was that Genesis was passed on with the Jews through an oral tradition until Moses wrote it down, and he wrote down the first five books, the Pentateuch / Torah. I think there's also a third name for those first 5 books, but I can't remember it.
but yeah, no, I mean, I think it's not unreasonable to think that every people in some form has parts of the original revelation, but until the time of Christ and his establishment of the church, the fullness of that revelation only was with the Jews, and then but now of course that fullness of the truth is in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Um, but it is interesting to see how even how to see these bits and pieces that these other religions have, and it's also really interesting. It's so weird to see how people think that, oh, every culture has X story, therefore it must be untrue. It's like,
I mean, like,
if anything, doesn't that lend credence to it happening? Like a story of a worldwide flood. Everyone has a story of a worldwide flood. Doesn't that lend credence to the idea there was a worldwide flood?
I mean, that's why I take this quote from Evola, which he wrote it in the foreword to his book Revolt Against the Modern World. He prefaced it that in reading this book, you are to treat myth as truer than fact. Essentially, the myths of the world are truer than any quote unquote scientific revelation of the modern day. Which, I mean, I also I have this very esoteric idea that actually there is a lot that the truths are found in the wisdom of the ancients instead of the modern day lab coat, because the lab coat oftentimes comes with this worldview of absolute rejection of the ancient world and our ancestral wisdoms seen in almost all tribes have similar origin stories. They have similar myths. They have similar deities and similar concepts of the divine, even though like from a secular point of view, like, oh, all these religions are different. It's like, no, you dig a bit deeper and you find out that actually, like, even though yes, Indian Indian paganism called Hinduism on the surface is completely antithetical to Christianity, but the fact that they share verbatim a lot of mythologies that are pretty much verbatim the same that were spread from the Indus Valley civilizations, when because that is seen as the cradle of civilization for humanity by a lot of perennial scholars, because it is the oldest civilization and kind of like the origin point of humanity. That when all these other peoples spread out, they brought these myths with them. Like the ancient Jews inherited the flood story from their ancestral homelands in Mesopotamia, which the Mesopotamians came from the Indus Valley. So the fact that all of them had the same myth, but maybe with different names of the characters, different name of the god, different name of Satan, different names of all these figures, but they still align, lends credence to the idea that there is this truth. And you can see it in all of them. You can see it in all traditional religions,
Well, there
which you can kind of sympathize as one massive cultural progression.
well there is a bit of truth in that because I forget the name of which group of Hindu deities, but they are directly a linguistic cognate to the Aesir in Nordic mythology, and that has to do with the Indo-European migrations. And we have to also remember that Hinduism is not necessarily a religion that is related to the religions that existed in India prior to the Indo-European migrations, and it was brought in by the migrants.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, it's all interesting stuff, and I'm doing that thing where I'm interjecting when I don't have anything to say, and I shouldn't be doing that.
I know, but it's doing a good job at creating a because
An
we
awkward void to move on to the next
Yeah.
topic.
yeah
Well, I mean, just to finish off, like
Okay, we'll let him
the
finish off because he's been doing a
the
great job.
The perennialist tradition is a great way to even understanding your own faith by understanding the other faiths as well. Like, say, people try to justify the Crusades, but honestly, to justify the Crusades, you can actually look at Islam, even though it was the enemy of the Crusades. Because in Islam, they have this concept of two different holy wars. There is the Greater Holy War and the Lesser Holy War. The Greater Holy War is the holy war fought in the spirit. It is the one fought by the warrior in the temptations of his life, and his spiritual warfare. Well, then the Lesser Holy War is the temporal one, the actual like physical warfare for your faith and for the spreading of your and for the spreading of the faith. Which that's why it's like the own person's inner struggle is greater than the actual like temporal struggle of the Lesser Holy War, even though both of them are important. Just because something is less important does not mean that is not important. That is also like another thing that a lot of Protestants get wrong, is they just think, well, okay, this isn't important, so we're just going to completely shut it. It's like, no, it's not as important, but it is still important to observe these things.
Yeah. So I guess we're gonna wrap up, but I will just say that I mean, in Catholicism we have that concept. I mean, knights. We could talk about knighthood another time because that's an actual monarchist topic. But a knight, our modern, I guess maybe specifically Anglosphere interpretation of a knight is just someone who's supposed to protect the honor of a fair maid or whatever. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's something I guess they do too. But a knight was supposed to confound the enemies of the cross of Christ and to wage an unceasing war against the heathen. Which in a sense we're all supposed to do, maybe not physically, of course, but instructing innocent is or not the innocent, instructing the ignorant is something we're supposed to do. But also the first thing we're supposed to be focused on is our own salvation. But anyways, I think now we can move on to our subject topic, right? Right? Or Darth or Victor. Will.
Yeah, we could finally talk about what we were supposed to talk about before we went off on that tangent. Inflation and the current state of the economy. In short, it's a dumpster fire.
Yeah, so the reason specifically I think that I brought this up today, or sprung to mind, because the only topic we actually I had slated for most of this week was our last topic. But Will's like, so what are we going to talk about? It was like the Georgia Guidestones and inflation. I think the reason I selected inflation primarily was because, or I guess the reason I selected inflation was because when we were driving home, my dad and I from work, we were listening to Michigan radio, which is our local branch of NPR or whatever. I don't ask me why.
PR.
Yes, I know it's stupid, but he doesn't like it, but he thinks it's the most balanced thing on the. I guess it's the most balanced thing on the radio because it's the only thing on the radio. Anyways, but anyways, the point is, it's not really that balanced though. I mean, for crying out loud, when The Simpsons has a NPR joke in the background with a poster on an NPR station where it's a scale, and then on the left hand side of the scale you have left, 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 and then on the right hand side of the scale you have a little right. I mean, come on. When literally The Simpsons is acknowledging NPR's bias. Anyways, okay. Sorry. Okay, refresh. Point Break. Okay. The reason I brought this up was because NPR was talking about these inflation reports. I don't know if that's irrelevant. Okay. And on their show Marketplace. And they're like, consumers, and they're like, that's okay, I shouldn't say that. Okay. And they said, well, consumers are spending, or the person or the hostess, I think, was saying, consumers, or
consumers are spending, even though they don't trust, even though they're not trusting in the economy. It's like, stop saying it's like, why? And okay, because, and this is the thing, like you're listening to something and you know that they can't hear you because they're in a studio thousands of miles away and you're not actually talking to them, but you're still screaming at them trying to get through. Well, not screaming, but in an aggravated tone. You know that feeling? Probably something that a lot of you are feeling right now and saying, "Get to the point, war." But you know, what the thing. Okay, hold on. I need to just, okay.
Reeves. Words, you can do this.
I can do this. I'm an adult. I can legally vote. Cower in your homes. I can legally vote. Anyways, okay, so they were, he, she, whoever the host was saying that they were confused because people were still spending even though consumer trust in the economy was low. And I was saying in an aggravated tone to the radio, well, of course, because this is what happened in Weimar, right? People were, or not necessarily in Weimar, but this is what, I can't remember specifically that happened, but people will spend their currency before, because they know that it's losing value. As soon as people realize, oh shoot, the dollar or the Reichsmark or whatever currency it is, as soon as they realize this is losing value, they're going to spend it before it becomes worthless. Okay, this is, this is what happens when people realize what inflation is. And the other thing, or the other item, is that the old definition of inflation, and I think we talked about this before on the podcast, or at least I have, but the old definition of inflation was simply an increase in the currency supply. So we have a fictional economy with $100,000, and the government prints another $10,000. That's inflation. Or the government removes $10,000. That's deflation. But the new definition of inflation, which the central banks, like I guess the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England and yada yada yada, want to use, is an increase in the rise of prices, which is ever so unhelpful because prices in different markets are going to rise and fall due to circumstances all the time. There's a giant fire in the teak. Oh no, the teak markets are up. Why? There's a giant fire. Oh no, retro computers prices are down. Why? Because somebody just found a giant warehouse full of IBM PCs. We can only hope. But it's ever so unhelpful because the rise and fall in one market isn't necessarily going to affect the others. Or, well, it will affect the others, but not necessarily. The new definition is so stupid, and I dislike it strongly. And if I'm being conspiratorial, because I can't really think of any other real legitimate reason for them to change this definition, it's just because they don't want the blame for actual inflation thrust upon them, because the central banks are the places where inflation actually comes from. They're like, why are the prices rising? Maybe because you printed a couple $1 trillion. I mean, obviously, prices would rise if there are less workers working. But the real reason the main reason we're seeing these price rises is because so much of our currency was printed ever since the pandemic, and they don't want to acknowledge that. And they're trying to do all these different things to slow the rise of prices, like raising the interest rates, which is going to work. Yeah. Oh, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Don't feel conspiratorial for saying that, because that's exactly why they changed the definition, because they don't want the blame for their poor management. Now, it used to be, the idea was this: inflation would be kept around 2%, and the idea is that since loan values don't change with inflation, that over time, inflation will cause prices to rise, it'll cause wages to rise, but debt will stay the same, and this will allow people to have higher equities on their assets. in the long run. This is a boomer idea, and it's part of the reason why the home market is so expensive. But yeah, that's part of the reason why the housing market is so expensive, because we've used inflation to basically protect 30-plus-year-old investments by making the goods that these investments, the collateral for these investments, so much more expensive due to inflation, and it's made life unaffordable for everyone else.
I mean, no, I mean, I don't know why I said no, but I mean, somebody said, well, at least inflation means that you're actually paying less on your loans. I mean, and Charles Coulomb, he made the analogy. It's like, I can't remember his exact analogy, but imagine there's an annoying person in your neighborhood who really bugs you, but then somebody firebombs your entire neighborhood. Hey, at least you don't have to deal with that annoying person anymore, right?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. And the analogy NPR made about people still buying stuff, is like, that's like saying that someone's choosing to eat give me a name of some disgusting food or something that would actually be horrific to eat.
Um, uh, uh, I mean, I don't. McDonald's eggs. Like, have you seen those? Like in the big breakfast. Those aren't eggs. Those are a failed government experiment that they wanted to get rid of, and they just chucked them on the front door of a McDonald's. They opened it up and they said, these are vaguely yellow. That's what scrambled eggs look like. And then they put it on an oven for 5 minutes and then sold it as eggs. That is what those are.
Choosing to spend your money even on the economy is crap. It's like choosing to eat the most disgusting food you can imagine because the other alternative is starvation. We're not spending money because we believe in the economy. We're spending money because we have to. Because that's why we have money. If we didn't have to spend money, you think any of us would be doing half the stuff we're doing right now? You think any of us would be at work right now? You think any of us would even care about inflation? No.
Be at work, yes, but it would depend. It would change the definition of labor without having a currency model. I mean, it would, like, I would say the healthy form of this would be a return to feudalism, which was essentially for the like, it had currencies, yes, but that was mostly used by merchants and higher castes. Well, then the majority of people did not possess coin. They possessed land that they farmed. Well, they didn't possess it. They technically rented it out from the aristocracy, which they paid a very small amount of their
grain to
of their yields and taxes. It was only like 5%, 5 to 10%, depending on your area. So like that's really like a true moneyless economy. Then you get to Bolshevism, which is kind of like the dark alternative to feudalism. Like every political and economic structure has a dark inverse, which communism is the inverse of not inverse, dark reflection of feudalism. While then capitalism is the dark what's the term, opposite of feudalism, because it incorporated the money supply and enslaved the worker to become a wage slave for his existence, instead of a truly independent man like he previously was under the feudal system, which is actually how feudal people saw themselves. They saw themselves as free peoples, freely giving themselves up to the divine authority.
And now we're a bunch of slaves who think we can make our own destiny.
Yes, that's the worst type of slaves, because they truly believe that they are free when they are not.
Yeah, I mean, and as we know from Aristotle, the corruption of the best is the worst. See, I can retain things from the one from Aristotle. I can retain things. No, I mean, yeah. Oh wait, Will, were you about to say something?
I forget what I was gonna say now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, the economy, the economy as it stands, it's just so frustrating. Now, I'm not necessarily going to say that I'm entirely Austrian in my economics. I get the argument that if we didn't have as much government intervention, there wouldn't be as many large corporations forming because a lot of these regulations are specifically designed to suit the large corporations. Um, but of course, I think that in the day of social media, when everybody wants to be on one place, in certain areas, like massive overarching corporations are bound to happen. But I mean, the thing is that I look at the way that all these economic experts are trying to fix the economy and all these suggestions, and it's like, no, why?
Well,
I mean, you're
well,
yelling at your television.
the problem with them is that they try to separate social from economic, when fundamentally, like, it's only in a liberal society have anybody actually ever thought of separating economics from the social aspect, which is quite frankly retarded, and it comes out of this idea that the end of history doctrine, where liberal democracy is just the end point of everything, and this will just lead us down to prosperity, and we can be completely ideologicalists under this liberal liberal utopia, which that's essentially what modern economists are. They are utopianists for this liberal system, and that's why they try to just say, oh well, if we just fix the economy, we can all just be truly free, atomized individuals living in a society.
Yeah, I mean,
Which,
Always said this too, and in my book, I've written this when talking about economics. Economics is a lot like meteorology in that it's mainly predicting, and anyone that tells you that they know for certain how it works is lying to you or they're an idiot.
no, I mean, the thing with economics is that you can study how an economy functions, but obviously you'll never see how it goes, and you can see what works, but you don't exactly know why, because every person is going to act in weird and wacky ways, and then there's going to be natural circumstances that you can't foretell. Somebody is, I mean, everybody's talking about the New England, this the New England fishing industry or whatever. You're like, wow, this is going to be great forever, and then people, and obviously and then people were like, oh shoot, we've accidentally fished most of the fish. I mean, they couldn't have foreseen that, because I mean, hey, they were getting good catches for you know hundreds of years before that. Um, but
Economics,
but also there was a significantly less amount of people fishing, which the unequal growth in the human to fish population and the amounts of mass fishing. I mean, that this is just one example of, like, honestly, it was like us maintaining the same standard of fishing ruined the ecology in the long run because of just the exponential growth of humans in that industry.
fish rationing to every Friday only. Bring out your fish sticks.
I mean, there's a reason why most of the whale population is suffering today is because of literally Soviet quotas. Back in back between the 1940s to the 1970s, where literally Soviet run fishing, they had to Soviet whalers specifically, they had to meet quotas, and they would harvest entire regions of ocean, and they'd only take like small amounts off of whales before dumping the majority of the carcass into the ocean, because these men had to fill the quotas no matter what because they were quotas. It's kind of like how in the Soviet system they would literally have like quotas for executing dissidents. This district in the Soviet Union has to execute these many dissidents, these many whites. So if they couldn't find enough, they would just pull people off the street and fill the quota by executing them. I mean that's a command economy, but I mean it's still kind of the same idea because fundamentally the Soviets were going off of a model where whaling has been this successful in the past. We are going to make a quota now of how much whaling we're going to be doing. And it fundamentally destroyed the ecology of much of the world oceans in terms of whale populations, which it's going to take centuries for the whale population to recover if humans were just to lift their hands up completely from whaling, which you can't control everyone.
Yeah. Wait. So this is actually a probably a dumb question, but after we figured out how to make oil from the groundwork, what did people need whale oil for, or why did whaling continue after we had oil from the ground?
Time to figure out how to refine oil into all the different usable forms. Like gasoline used to be considered a wasteful byproduct, and they'd burn it to run the refining towers that separated the different hydrocarbons. It wasn't until someone created the internal combustion engine that they figured out that gasoline was useful for mechanical fuel.
Oh yeah. Well, apparently there were I don't know if this was stories or whatever, or people just guessing, but apparently in ancient Egypt they had all this black stuff coming up from the ground, and they were trying to throw it away as fast as they could. And it's like, oh, if they waited a couple millennia, they would have realized they were they were throwing away liquid gold.
Yeah, but
I mean, like
still do a lot of whaling though, and a lot of people really get mad at Japan for doing that.
well, I mean, Japan, like, they understood how, like, I think it's kind of like built in many of these East Asian cultures, which they didn't embrace the Faustian spirit of ultimate production, individualism, etc. They fundamentally understood their connection with nature far longer than, I would say, in the European West, where there was a fundamental separation between us and the spiritual within nature. So when they whaled, they would use the entirety of the whale, and they would limit their whaling to healthy proportions. Like they did not take chunks out of the population of whaling, and it was very sustainable, even into the higher Japanese populations that you saw more around the Meiji era and afterwards. I would just say overall, like their methodology to whaling was completely different than the European style. In like, I consider the Soviet Union as an extension of the European style of thinking because it did fundamentally embrace this idea. Well, if it's working right now, it will work like this forever.
You make a valid point. Like, I know America did something similar too when it came to bison, buffalo. We hunted them nearly to extinction so we can use their hides to make leather for industrial machinery. And it never occurred to us to use the rest of the bison or hunt them sustainably or even farm them because bison are domesticatable. American
Well, what
Took us a minute, but
when you're focused on profit, you're not focused on the long term. You're focused upon what can I do now so that way I can outcompete my competitors, which that's ultimately another reason why capitalism is so destructive and why many of the traditionalists are very anti-capitalistic, because it fundamentally destroys everything in its path to make a dollar.
yeah.
That's why I'm also an anti-capitalist and mostly in the anti-consumerist nature, not in the Marxian nature.
Yeah, I mean the thing is,
when it comes to economics, I used to be essentially a libertarian. I used to basically be a libertarian, except I acknowledge you could do certain things. But it's not that it's not. I mean, we're not saying markets or whatever are necessarily bad, but there are certain things where you shouldn't be allowed to do things, and two, there always has to be this moral understanding of and moral regulation of how the economy works, like not working on Sundays. I mean, obviously if you're a doctor, that'd be nice, but if people could stop like dying on Sundays, that'd be nice. Or but there has to be.
Snyder is the Grim Reaper. There we go.
But so I mean, this also is like why the Indians, well, actually, most civilizations put the merchant at the bottom, like they put him beneath slaves. That the merchant was the most honorable individual in a society, and that you should keep him as far away from the levers of power as possible. Which fundamentally you see in our civilization today, the complete inverse, where the merchant is valued even more than kings. Like by the merchants, I mean the capitalist class that we refer to them today. But they still are a necessary function in a healthy society. You can't get rid of the merchant, but you don't allow him political power. Because they will just destroy everything in their way to make profit and to enhance their coffers and their immediate beneficiaries' coffers at the expense of others.
Yes, and I mean that's I have nothing further to add to that statement. I was gonna do the thing where I try to waffle on and eventually find a point, but which I guess I just did, but in a weird way.
So
yeah, reject capitalism and socialism. Embrace distributism.
Return to tradition, which distributism, like the fact that it needed to be written down, meant that it was already on the decline. Like yes, it's in today's world. Yes, it is a good counter theory, but the fact that we abandoned that system long ago, and only after a while did we truly regret losing that ancient, truly spiritual form of living, which when the economy actually didn't really matter to anybody. Like it's only a fixation of today's Faustian man, which is why I give the economy no credence. The economy could burn for all I care, as long as the spiritual integrity of the people are sound.
And I think, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think now might be a good time to move on to our very last topic, which is, after all this heavy conversation, the Georgia Guidestones.
Because we forgot it last week.
And all I
Yeah,
have to say is, I hate the Antichrist.
Yeah, like I didn't know these things existed. And I saw the news, like Georgia Guidestone's blown up, and I'm like,
I heard
what?
about them a little bit a while ago. I heard about them. Basically, nobody knows exactly who put them up, but it was made during the latter half of the Cold War, and the logic was basically if nuclear warfare actually happened and like civilization was completely annihilated or humanity was brought near extinction, something in there, that these stones would survive and give instructions about how to basically springboard civilization back to what it was prior to the apocalypse.
well, no,
Yeah.
it was not necessarily to bring it back to before the apocalypse, but to bring it to a new liberal utopia that the society that funded it believed that we had not achieved yet.
And nobody
Because obviously, if you're recovering from a nuclear war, you obviously want to take your advice on how to rebuild society from the people who blew up the last one.
yes, that's
Yes,
wonderful. Have we figured out yet who actually originally built these things?
I
well,
don't.
there is speculation. I forget the guy's name was Christian, his first name. I don't remember his last name, but he was a private individual that went to a company that that specialized in stone structures. And he came to them with this exact engineered design, so that way it could also act as a calendar, like a sundial, where the sun would shine on a day at noon. Every day at noon it would shine to what day it is inside the Georgia Guidestones. But also it had I think it was 8 languages.
I heard 3.
I remember it being 8, and that's why there were 4 pillars, and on each side there was a different language for the instructions. And it essentially talked about it was essentially the UN Charter put into like more secret society terms and more liberal terms. Like there's one point where all nations should remain peaceful to one another and resolve any dispute in an international court. So essentially, you're saying submit to the United Nations. It also had guidances on don't let the human population rise above 500 million, and these other things that are very common in especially Freemasonic circles. So it has led to speculation that it was probably funded by a group of Masons that had conspired together to build it and engineer it specifically, which the guy who supposedly funded it, and he said he got the fundings from a private group, said they had been developing it for years. So it wasn't just a spur of the moment, we're going to build this. It was planned for years to be erected. And then some guy that was acting like a good combat engineer decided to take some C4 to it, which he only got one of the pillars, which is sad because any good combat engineer would just keep on looping C4 across all the structure and blow it all in place. But whatever.
We are limited. We are limited by the. Hey, maybe because of inflation, you can only enforce so much C4.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't buy C4. That's the thing.
Well, I can buy the C2 soundtrack for Minecraft, and if I put 2 of those together, naturally that equals C4. No.
Explosives are like. I'm not saying I have the ingredients in front of me, but I know just from like being in the military that they are easy to improvise and make on your own.
And also, it's not illegal for you to have explosives. You just need a special destructive weapons license. You can own a Claymore Roomba, a Kaboomba, if you will. I don't think they would want you actually using it, but you can.
Yeah, and anybody who's like...
my house is too small. The Claymore Roomba would probably level half of it itself.
Okay. But
a Claymore
still,
only explodes in one direction, by the way. It's not like a traditional bomb. Even and typically it's filled with pellets.
I don't care, I still call it a Kaboomba.
The Kaboomba.
What? I mean...
So, they confirmed that they used C4 to demolish it?
No, they didn't. I'm just using C4 as a analogy. It was some explosives, but it did look actually fairly competently done That's
It seemed like the guy knew what he was doing. He did a.
so that's why I lend credence to like possibly he was a combat engineer. Just saying, my fellow engineer out there, good job. I'm not endorsing, by the way, his actions. I'm endorsing his skill.
Wait. Oh, there's actually a video of it. I didn't know that.
Yes, there is.
Oh, wow.
Security cam.
There's no sound, unfortunately.
Oh,
But I know they ended up demolishing it entirely afterwards. But tannerite, because tannerite is usually fairly accessible to the public. You think a large quantity of tannerite could have done that?
If you're able to concentrate it, yes. Because if you explosives will always try to find the point of least resistance to disperse their blast. So that's why you have shaped charges. So that way they explode in a certain direction and you guide it. So the fact that he was able to destroy one of the pillars means that he was able to create a shaped charge out of whatever explosives that he did use on the structure.
The pillars are made of granite, so that's no small feat because granite it's one of the hardest rocks you can work with.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not saying that, like, just putting explosives near something won't leave it pretty messed up, but typically with heavier things like granite, you need to be very deliberate in how you set up, making sure that it destroys the structure and doesn't just use the structure as a wall and blows the explosion out the opposite direction from the wall.
I will. Oh, that's kind of derailing from the explosives conversation. Never mind. I'll let you finish that before I say my thing.
Well, no, I'm done.
Okay. I will say that unlike the destruction of monuments or whatever we saw a couple summers ago, where there were a whole bunch of people around. I don't know of any instances of when people were tearing down statues, people getting crushed by the falling, giant hunks of metal and stone. But I mean, come on, guys, you're tearing down this giant half-ton bronze statue, and like I don't know, the crowd seemed too pressing for me. But at least this guy, whoever he was, did it in the middle of the night when no one was there, so no one got hurt. So that's good.
He's OSHA certified demolitionist.
And they tore down and they're going to tear down the rest of them. But apparently Pfizer's CEO's like, we will rebuild, and it's like, I really should.
Oh, okay. Revealed preference, Pfizer guy. Well, it's exactly like if somebody comes out to defend it, immediately put them on your radar of suspicion. And when they reveal their hand like that, that's when you gotta take notes.
Wait.
So
demolishing the Georgia Guidestones becomes the new "He will not divide us, capture the flag." Where every time they rebuild the Guidestones, we try a new ridiculous method to destroy them.
I mean, it's just so. I mean, the whole thing, how that was allowed to go up in the first place is just ridiculous.
It was the best thing to come out of 2016, though. Let me tell you what.
2016, Vix.
what?
Will stop living in the past.
I'm sorry. That was probably the most interesting thing that happened on the internet when I was like a junior or a sophomore in high school. I mean,
What was?
when I was crippled after I had my leg surgery, I spent a good portion of that summer just viewing the recaps from that. That was just hilarious.
Recaps from what? We lost you.
Not the Vitus escapades. Like just watching all the footage of people being an idiot on live stream to troll Shia LaBeouf.
Oh. Yeah, no, I mean, 2016, what a year, man.
They weren't good times.
But they were funny. It was before. It was back when everything that was wrong with the world still seemed kind of humorous and ridiculous.
We could afford to laugh.
Yeah, and then after a couple years, it stopped being funny, and now here we are. And no laughing left. There's only tears.
The problem with with that is yes, in 2016, I mean, I would still say it was a dark year because that's when you saw a lot of the tech censorship start of the let's just say dissident voices, the ones that were too spicy to be allowed on the internet. And because of that, I just can't say it was a good year, objectively.
Yeah. I mean, it
was just kind of foreshadowing of times to come. I mean, really, the censorship really did begin with Roosevelt's anti-fascist regime, that was the dictatorship of America for a while, that censored anybody who was quasi-skeptical of his regime and skeptical of specifically American policy. We all remember Father Coughlin, which he specifically had his radio show canceled by Roosevelt himself because he was turning too popular too quickly and becoming too much of a dissident voice for Roosevelt's administration to handle. So because of that, you can see the censorship dating back in 2016 was kind of the internet was still kind of anarchic at that point before. I mean, there was some tech censorship, but not as much. But it was a blueprint of what to come, because you saw that already in the radio. They censored it first. Then when television came, they censored television. Then when streaming platforms came, they censored those. And then the internet. The truly anarchic space of the internet.
Are you an anarcho-internetist?
I'm a guy who likes using anarchy to spread dissident information. That is the difference. You can use anarchy to your own advantage. I don't endorse anarchy, though.
I think really to try some of what you were saying in a more direct way, at least from my perspective. The problems with our society, they've always been, American society has been like this ever since the Reformation, really, before anybody came over here. But we didn't really notice those problems because on the surface everything seemed to be going great because in the 50s materially, everything was hunky dory. And then of course we were lulled into that sense of comfort, and we got into the 60s, and then you got into the 70s, and progressively each decade just got uglier. But by 2016 we were still able to laugh at it. I think at that time I was getting upset because because I wasn't really so much to the political side of YouTube at that point. I was getting upset because that was when YouTube was specifically going through its really big copyright problem, where film studios were just copy claiming reviews of things which were legally allowed. Yeah, that was where I was with my dissatisfaction with YouTube. But I'm really so young that I can't really remember the truly free YouTube. My youngest recollections of YouTube must have been when I was 2008, 9, when I was just watching videos of trains passing by, crossing.
PewDiePie before the bridge incident. I've been on YouTube that long.
I mean, I was in dissident right YouTube back in 2016, so I especially remember it. I remember the censorship because that's where the censorship began. It was specifically the people that were the more intellectual on the right, the people that could actually genuinely articulate deeper deeper philosophical thoughts that were anti-liberal. And then they were always the first victims. And you kind of see like the containment right is one of the few spaces left on the YouTube sphere. I'm talking about like your Steven Crowders, your
Ben Shapiro's.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro's, your PragerU's. They are the controlled opposition to try to control the right wing dialogue, because they are the only ones you're allowed to go to.
A separation of church and state
is a Western value. That's like PragerU there, but it's just like, no, this is containment. You need to break the regime's programming. You need to break their control over the lexicon, which I kind of see like the destruction of the Georgia Guidestones just kind of wrapping this in as it is a person that probably was less articulate in his beliefs, but he could feel intuitively that these stones represented a great evil upon the world, which that great evil, like the Georgia Guidestones, is essentially the most dogmatic liberalism ever articulated. So he's kind of like those early day censored YouTubers on the distant right that were truly convincing people that this system of democratic liberalism is an evil structure in and of itself and has led to the deaths of millions just to achieve its own ends, and has no greater purpose than just perpetuating itself. Which that's kind of like what you can see in the censorship too. It's the liberal system trying to perpetuate itself into eternity.
Yeah. Shoot, I'm tired. I don't know. Well, I've been up since. The thing is, when it comes to the controlled opposition, because I kind of have to get it. I don't even think at this point it's even necessarily just outright banning people, because there are people like was he John Doyle, who's almost A tier based. He's almost A tier based, but he still thinks the founding fathers. He gets that, you know, everything is he gets the earlier stage of liberalism thing, but he doesn't get it to the founding fathers. He doesn't realize that the founding fathers were an earlier stage of liberalism, or maybe he does, but he almost gets it. So people like that and Charles Colomb or whatever, they can still be around, but they're not gonna. But YouTube isn't going to. Even if they don't outright ban them, they're going to make sure that they never gain much of a following.
Well, Charles Colomb, I would say, is also like appealing to a very niche audience.
Well, yeah. Officer Clancy,
but so, I mean, like, although I would say that is kind of like based of him, because he doesn't appeal to the broad masses, kind of like a John Doyle does. He appeals to a very specific group of elites. Like, I say elites because it is truly elite to hold like monarchist views in America these days, and traditional Catholic views in modernity. Well, then John Doyle, I kind of see him as academic agent sees him. It's like he's 90% there, but there's a 10% gap that he cannot get over no matter what he does. It just cannot get past his mind. It's like, say, not associating the founding fathers as some divine figures of the American cult. Like he can't shed that, which that's also just part of the control. Because if you still fundamentally believe in America, you're not going to propose anything that would actually change the system. You just try to perpetuate the system because you believe it to be inspired by your divine entities, which are like the founding fathers to them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he sort of seems. I mean, now that I think about it, he kind of seems like a C.S. Lewis figure, where he almost got it, but he just couldn't get over the papacy thing.
in his book, maybe it's The Hideous Strength, or one of his space books I haven't read, and I've just heard about it, and I really need to read it because apparently it is a good book. But he's Merlin. Spoilers, by the way. Merlin is back, and he's like, and there's a problem or whatever. It's like, we need to appeal to the bishops, and the guy's like, we can't do that because yada yada yada. It's like, oh, it's like, we need to appeal to the king. It was like, oh, we can't do that because da 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 da. And then it's like, we need to appeal to him. It's very beautiful, the one whose job it is to raise princes and cast down injustice, and we need to appeal to the emperor. And the guy's like, there is no emperor. And Merlin sat back in a world that he had never known or whatever. It's like, he never mentioned the Pope. Lewis never, it's like Merlin well, Merlin actually existed. He was a Catholic, so you think he would have been like, oh, what about the Pope? But the guy's like, oh yeah, he's still in Rome. It's like, oh, okay, let's go. No, but John Doyle just kind of seems like that, and I hope he gets there, because obviously it's root for the home team. And I hope Lewis eventually got there before his death. We won't know this side of eternity, of course, but yeah. Yeah, just get there, guys. You're this close.
It's just that natural barrier. It's that conditioning that has been set in their minds by the regime, and it is, most plebeians are not meant to have that ability to break that conditioning. It's just not in most people's natures to do that. It's typically for a very select few, and they were typically men of the aristocratic class, which I don't see John Doyle as part of that aristocratic class. He can feel intuitively that something is wrong, but his conditioning is too strong.
And I don't really consider myself a part of that class either. I mean, I think for me, it's just, I realized that I just made the simple connection. I don't know if this is the exact order, but I think I realized that if Catholicism is true, like I believe it is, then my worldview, and this I think it's subconscious, has to be Catholic. And that means being Catholic in my politics and being Catholic in that. Now, I think the monarchism sort of came first, but I think the reason why I'm here now is because I realized that if Catholicism is true, then the Catholic worldview has to
perpetuate.
It has to be there in every element of my life, and I kind of envy, not necessarily envy, but Tolkien. He's like, I didn't really write Lord of the Rings to be a specific, an explicitly Catholic work, but you can see it, you can, if you read Lord of the Rings, you can get those Catholic themes through and through, because he was so, just everything about him was Catholic. And for me, if I wrote a fictional, world, I have a couple ideas hanging around in my head for fictional book series or whatnot. One's a sci-fi thing set in an alternate timeline, but it's the future, obviously, because sci-fi, and one's a fantasy world or whatever. For me, I would have to make a conscious effort to make those things Catholic, because even now it's not as much, but physically, not physically, but there was always that mental feeling uncomfortable when it's like separation of church and state is wrong. It's like, I know that's wrong. I know separation of church and state is wrong, but that whole, my entire life, even being taught in Catholic school, that separation of church and state, this revolutionary idea, it's I don't really consider myself anything special. I just consider, I mean.
So to go on that, for one, if you are a Christian, fundamentally you must reject a liberal democracy and republicanism, because your religion is a monarchical one, and the way temporal authority is to govern is to emulate the divine, and God rules as an absolute monarch up in heaven. He is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He is not the president of committees or the president of presidents. He's not the prime minister of prime ministers over parliaments. These things are fundamentally institutions that are in defiance of the divine and ultimately lay the authority down to man. So that's why you cannot rely upon just trying to change a system from within that is fundamentally against your worldview. You must perpetuate your worldview even against the established norms of modernity, because modernity is evil and you know it. Like, I brought this question across my old man one time. Like, I questioned my old man, it's like, you know that Christ is King of Kings? And he, of course, says yes. It's like, then where are the kings for him to be king over? We are a monarchical religion, and he tacitly agreed, but then he goes on about the Constitution being the greatest thing ever because he can't break that conditioning. People just cannot break what they are conditioned to believe. They must be dragged out screaming into a new belief structure, into a new conditioning. That's how all societies have been. Kicking and screaming if you're going to install something new. It's not at the peasants' behest, it is at the elites putting it into law. And if it's a good and just elites, they are right to do so.
Yeah. I think for me, I don't know what my role to play ultimately in this American monarchist thing is. Part of me feels content just to because of the same because I authority, because it's always because it's elites or whatever that change society. Part of me would be content just to be a peasant. Because that's what I am. I don't really have any noble blood in me at all. I'm not I'm not I mean I'm a commoner in every sense of the word. Well, except my mind. I'm autistic, so by definition I'm not. Anyways. But I don't I can't I can't sit back here and do nothing while the country I love is, in this state. What am I supposed to do? Eh, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I was trying to attempt by talking here, but I don't know.
But by the way, for preset, whenever I say Christian, I mean a true Christian, not the fake Baptists, not the fake gay American million denominations that are all split off by individuals. So that's just a response from the chat who was saying, well, it's like not all Christians are. It's like, yeah, but I don't consider them in my lexicon as Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. So you ever wonder why? Yeah. I'm sorry. We have to take one more bash at Protestantism. You ever wonder? You ever wonder when you're going to use the things you learned in math in real life? Well, you'll learn about exponential. You'll use exponential growth when you're trying to talk about the increase in Protestant denominations.
Yeah, and the still one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church that's still united for 2,000 years, and Protestants having to do like their weird like family tree, like, oh yeah, we are the 42nd split off over here. That's us. And we found the truth, guys. Instead of these guys that are the origin point.
Yeah.
We've really been hitting the intellectual tonight, haven't we?
I mean, I would say that you can never have enough. Honestly, like this is why I like Academic Agents, because literally his entire streams are like 90% academic and like 10% comedic.
Well, as opposed to Charles Colomb, which is 60% academic and 40% 13th floor. What were we talking about?
Yeah, what were we talking about again?
Oh man, we need to get him back on the show as a show again. That would be nice. Yeah, I mean, and with us, we're 50% C, 50% weed.
I actually
You got the reference?
Yeah.
So I'm just to end this, because we've been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ultimately like if you are going to be someone against the system fundamentally, and if you are a monarchist, you are essentially taking up a pledge against a liberal democracy. And you understand that now you are a dissident in the current regime, and dissidents never have it easy. They are always outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered by institutions that are out there to destroy them. Destroy their credibility, destroy them financially, to destroy them physically. So you must take caution. You must only reveal your beliefs to certain people that are trustworthy, and that you are on a committed path, and that can actually be truly dissidents to the system. Because if you relate to somebody that you fundamentally disagree with the foundation of the United States, you are going to be getting 90% of people. Like if you attack even like all the prefaces that was the founding of this nation, which was built off the concept of liberal democracy. Even though it was very aristocratic at the time, it was pretty much ruled by the landed gentry, which was very revolutionary, very liberal, and very democratic. Then you are fundamentally attacking most people's worldviews that you are going to be around. So take caution. And just know that you stand alone, and that you just have to be a vanguard. You have to take that vanguard mentality that you are forefront of some change that you want to bring.
And there generations down the line, if we hold true and we will come out on top if we strive. They won't necessarily remember you specifically, but their debt to you is going to be great. And that's not why you should do it because they're going to owe me or whatever, but you will have helped accomplish something great. Like every in history we remember the generals who fought the battles, but we also need to remember each individual soldier who did his small part, even if he wasn't necessarily a Medal of Honor recipient or whatever. And I guess we're one of those in the metaphorical sense, even if we're not on the actual field right now.
I mean,
well, Darth's an actual soldier, but
Yeah, I mean, I actually am. Which, God, I get this all the time because like certain people that know that I'm a monarchist and I'm in the armed forces. I mean, it's because I hate America's ideology. I don't hate America in the abstract. It's just like I don't worship the flag. I don't worship the Constitution. I don't worship the founding fathers as deities. I don't worship ideas of freedom, liberty, and equality. I'm a soldier because that is who I am. That is what I was chosen to be. And it just always has been my calling in life. I've always kind of known that I was supposed to be there, no matter no matter like which flag it is. And a, uh, I'm not a citizen of any other nation, and I can't become a soldier of any other country that I'm not a part of. Um, and I keep on getting bombarded. I'm told, well, you shouldn't be in the armed forces because you don't believe in it. You shouldn't be in the United States. You should leave. And it's like, well, where am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to abandon my brothers and sisters in uniform?
Leaving
These
the
are things.
doesn't solve the problem. I hate it when people say that. It's like we love our country. We don't want to leave it. We want to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like I would say like legally too, America is one of the hardest nations to stop being a citizen in. Like once you're a citizen, it's like you're in a jail. Like, the FBI will track you down. The IRS will make sure that you pay taxes, even if you're an expat and you have nothing in the United States anymore. As long as you're still a citizen, you must pay must pay your tithe to the Fed. Um, and you have to pay a capital gains tax to even be allowed to stop being a citizen, which is like roughly 1/10 of all of your value you must pay to the federal government to stop being a citizen. So, yeah, it's like just leaving. It's like, oh, just leave. Okay. Clearly, you don't know what that entails. Clearly, you don't know that I am a prisoner in my own country.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're probably all tired, but I think the best song, even if obviously I don't think it was written explicitly as a monarchist song, but I think one of the best, American songs for for us as a movement, and I think it would be a great national anthem just because of how humble it is the song "God Bless America," because the line "Through the night with a light from above." And we are and have been for a very long time in a very dark night. Um, yeah, that's where we are, and we need to get through that.
Yes. But I mean, I could ramble on for hours, but I'm
That's
I'm tired too.
yeah. So
Let's finish in prayer,
all
guys.
right, all right. So you're ready, Will?
Yes.
All right.
I'm honestly getting antsy. I've been sitting in here for 2.5 hours and I need to move desperately.
Okay. I'll plug the social medias very quickly. If you would like to join us live on Monarchist Minute, you can join our Discord where we record these at 8 p.m. Every Friday, unless, of course, there's something important. And you can also follow us on our various social medias like Twitter and the Gab and the Facebook group that I still need to find the link to. Could somebody message me that, please? And any other whatevers we have in the description. And now we will conclude in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Until next week, may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.